Hello everyone, Soulflame here. I had someone ask me a question about my action bars and keybinds. This is a bit of an involved answer, but bear with me, I think it's interesting. Before I get started, I should mention that I use a speed pad, and because I use a speed pad, my UI is optimized to make use of it. As you can tell from the picture, a speed pad is merely a specialized keyboard. As you can see here, mine has 15 buttons along the top, 2 more buttons along the side, and an 8-directional joystick, for a total of 25 possible keybinds. So what I've done is taken the numbers 1 through 10, with 0 representing 10, and I've assigned those numbers to the speed pad. Here is a close-up of my action bar, taken directly from my UI, so that you can see what those numbers correspond to. Basically, these buttons are my most frequently used spells and abilities. There are 2 more keys on this row, the plus and minus signs. I've assigned these to my mouse since it has extra buttons. Again, showing you a close-up of the UI so that you can see what's assigned there. One of those is Remorseless Winter, and the other one is actually empty. As before, these are spells that I'll use frequently, but in this case not as frequently as the 1 through 10. Most of the bottom row, along with the thumb button above the joystick, I have dedicated to modifier keys, including Control, Alt, and Shift, or some combination thereof. Each of these modifiers allows me to have a new set of 10 keybinds, for example, Shift 1 through 10, Alt 1 through 10, and Control 1 through 10. These modifier keys act just like the keyboard, so they also work to control the keybinds on the mouse. Back to the UI to show you my Shift row. Again, these are abilities that I'm going to use fairly frequently and mostly in combat, but not as frequently as my main rotation. If you're a DK, you'll probably recognize some of the abilities on this row as heals, interrupts, and situational abilities, as well as a couple minor cooldowns. The bottom row I have assigned to Alt plus the number keys, and there I put things that I will use sometimes, but they tend to have much longer cooldowns. On this row, I tend to put things that I will be using only sometimes, but not very frequently. Things like major offensive or defensive cooldowns, basically 2 minutes plus, speed boosts, potions, trinkets, that sort of thing. Finally, off to the side are things that I mostly haven't bothered to keybind. The only things I actually have bothered to keybind on this are my 2 mounting macros. You may recognize some of the things on these bars, including goblin gliders, bandages, food, reses, hearthstones, etc. Moving back to the speed pad, I will explain some of the method to the madness as far as how I chose what I put where. Although the keypad is a very small and intuitive interface, some of the buttons are harder to find than others. I use the outside rows and the middle row as home keys. I put a small series of felt pads on the buttons in the middle row to help me find them without looking. This configuration allows me to find the numbers 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 10 very quickly. Because of this, I try to put the main parts of my rotation on buttons 1, 3, and 5. I put AoE on button 6. I put placeable spells on button 8, and anything that's time sensitive, such as an interrupt or a taunt, on button 10. I nearly forgot to mention movement, which is assigned to the 8-directional joystick. I have W, A, S, and D assigned to the 4 major directions, and the 4 minor directions I don't have bound at all. This essentially allows me to use the joystick to turn just as if I was using WASD or the arrow keys. One last bit of advice as I wrap up. If, as I do, you play lots of alts, you will probably want to consider making all of your keybinds somewhat similar all the way across all of your tunes, so that no matter which spec or class you are playing, all of your keybinds will be more or less consistent. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, on my tunes, 6 is always an AoE spell, 8 is always a ground targeted spell, Shift 4 is always a minor defensive cooldown, and so forth. Essentially, by binding all of your keys according to function, and by trying to keep everything in the same place, you can greatly increase the consistency across classes. This plays well with your natural muscle memory, so that in any given situation, such as preparing for incoming damage, or preparing to interrupt, you'll always be reaching for the appropriate key. This also means that instead of trying to remember unique names and locations for spells on each character, you can reduce a rotation to a simple numerical sequence. For example, a rogue might be 3-3-3-4-5. The more consistently you can bind all of your spells across all of your tunes, the easier it will be to play multiple characters. If you have questions or comments about this video, you can reach me through this YouTube channel or on my blog. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope this video helped.